This is the Lotus Bloom Podcast. And here is your host, Morgan Wiley.
Welcome to another episode of the Lotus Bloom Podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Wiley, and I'm excited you're here. Today, I have the very special opportunity to share with you an interview I had with a very dear friend of mine. Her name is Gaby Robbins. I'm excited to share her story with you today. She's so passionate about everything that she does, and I love how honest she is sharing the challenges she faced going from one creative endeavor to having to pivot to another. So please be encouraged by Gaby's story. So for our listeners, would you give us a little background in your creative journey?
Sure, absolutely. So I am Gaby Robbins. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, and I grew up with just my mom and my younger sister. I have an older sister who, when I was younger, traveled the world and did all kinds of stuff. And so I feel like my creative journey kind of kicked off with a mom who was super, she really felt like it was important to give us as much of the world and expose us to as much creativity and culture. I'm full Mexican. As she could. We grew up in inner city Los Angeles, and she worked in the housing authority, and she just saw how easy it was for kids to get wrapped up in what was happening in the neighborhoods, and put us in private school and took us to the museums and took us to theater. I mean, my biggest treat every year for my birthday was she would take us to like the different Broadway shows that were coming through town. And so she also did a lot to distract us and keep us off the streets. And so I did folklorico, which is Mexican dancing. I did karate. I did cheerleading. I did ballet. I did modern dance. I did tap dance. And ballet was the one that kind of stuck. So I was a ballet dancer from the time I was about 7, which I got on point early. And I was doing that till I was about 16. And it was the thing that kind of drove me to it. I wanted to be a prima ballerina, and I watched Fame and I watched Joffrey Ballet, and I just thought, I'm going to go to the School of the Arts in New York. And life got a hold of me, and I was a cheerleader. I did all that, and I realized at one point my dance teacher really pulled me aside and was like, listen, you don't have a body to be a prima ballerina. You've got great birthing hips, but apparently that is not one of the things that prima ballerinas need to have. Oh. And so she was like, this isn't going to be your thing, but do it because you're good at it. And you tell a story with your hands and you're great at this. But she kind of wanted to give me like a realistic expectation, which I would have preferred it when I was like 12 or 13, because at 16, you're kind of like, well, holy crap, every weekend of my entire, existence at that point had been as a ballerina. So, but at the same time, I was really enjoying classical music, and my mom would take us to the art shows, and we had a really great community center that was started by Edward James Olmos, who's an actor, a Mexican-American actor, that had every kind of Mexican-American art like that you could be involved in and learn, but also brought in like choreographers from New York and stuff like that. So I was exposed to a lot, and my mom was the kind of mom that was like, well, you're not doing anything this summer, so I put you in a professional theater acting thing for the summer. And we were like, Mom, we've never acted before. And she'd be like, too bad, I already paid for it, so you got to do it, And so it was awesome because I got pushed into doing a lot of stuff. And once I was there, I loved it. So I got to experience a lot of that, and it kind of fueled the flame of just arts and creativity. And my mom was an avid reader, so she always had a book and she would always talk to me about it. I didn't really start reading until I had to in high school, novels. But once I did, I would fly through books, But I kind of graduated high school, went to college for one semester and hated it. And my big sister was living in Nashville, Tennessee, and her husband was working in the Christian music industry and was like, come be my nanny. And I just needed to get out of LA. I just realized, not only was God calling me to something different, but I needed a different environment. And I knew I was going to just end up kind of like everybody else. And I didn't want that. So I moved to Nashville, which threw me into a creative industry. I was in choir, but I could not make music or had no clue how music was made. I could read music, but so I got thrown into this environment of tons of musicians and ended up meeting my husband, who opened my eyes and my world up to creativity through music, and realizing I couldn't create music, but I knew what music meant to me growing up. Music was a huge part of my life. And because we were both Christians and his job, like he was a Christian hip hop artist, our goal was to kind of reach kids through music to give them hope. And we got married and started on that journey. Now, I was a prima ballerina, like probably from 8 a.m. to about 4 p.m. Saturday and Sunday. But in the evenings, I was a dancer with dance crews in LA. So I kind of lived a double life. I also did beauty pageants in there. And the beauty pageants were because I heard if you won, you got to go to Disney World. So that was really like, it wasn't because I wanted to be Miss America Preteen California. It was because I wanted to go to Disney World. And I always got first runner up. I never actually won. But yeah, I always won the like talent division because I danced and stuff, but I never actually won. So once I got married, we started going to Disney World, and that was a huge deal for my kids. I went to Disneyland as a kid, and that was like growing up in LA. I know people have seen Boys in the Hood and you see, all the movies. It's hard. And so there was something about Disneyland that just was like getting to go somewhere that was safe and pretty and innocent and creative.
Magical.
Loved it. Yes, magical. And so once I got married and my husband was like, heck yeah, let's do this. He loved it too. Disney World became a big part of our lives with our kids and stuff. But it was around the time my son was born that my mom came to stay with me, that she was like, hey, do you want to watch Harry Potter? And I was like, what? And so she put the movies on and I was instantly hooked. Like I got the books. I would read them anywhere I could. I was staying up till 3 a.m. reading these books. And then my niece, who was in high school, was like, you've got to watch this movie Twilight. And I was like, what? I'm not watching a vampire movie. And watched the movie. And I was like, wait, there's something about this, and like sped through all the books. And all of a sudden, because I couldn't really dance anymore, and my opportunity for things like Disney World and the creative outlets that, to be honest, my mom kind of instilled in me weren't there anymore. Books became that for me. And I will tell you that transition was hard, because being a person who's creative physically, to kind of switch that over to creativity in your imagination, it's hard because I missed it, but it still fed that in me. And I got to the point where I was like, okay, this is good. As long as I can read every single day, I'll be fine, and I started doing that. I would talk to the ladies in my office. I worked as a social media person in a convention and visitors bureau here in town. And I would talk to these ladies about these books that I was reading. And they were like, you just got to write a book. And I was like, I was always the kid that like could write an essay in a day and get like, I could tell you the, irony, or I could tell you the foreshadowing, and I could just do it. But I was like, there's no way I could write a book. And they were like, well, you got to figure it out, like find out how to do it. So I looked up this, I was just like looking up things to do. And I was just looking through the newspaper and I was like, oh, this sounds cool. And it was about YA books. And I didn't know anyone. I wasn't about to tell anyone in my circle, hey, I'm going to a YA book conference just because I think I might want to write a book. And I went to the conference and I sat down at the table next to this really cool girl, and we started talking. And now I'm on your podcast.
She was a pretty cool girl.
Yeah. And so I will say Morgan was a huge part of encouraging me to just have the mindset that I could do it. And being a part of her community was the reason why I met Kelly, was the reason why I met a lot of the people that I met in the writing community. And it was for me at that time, it was a lifeline, because there's a part of me that can't really do every day without having a creative outlet. And it's super important to me. And my husband and I have talked about it for years, how there are people who are wired differently, you know, and that's why we homeschooled our kids, because I have the most intelligent children who are obedient and respectful, but gosh, were they being squashed in school. They just were unhappy, and we pulled them out, and they did homeschool, and they did a creative thing along with their homeschool. I mean, my son did coding for a really long time, and then now he's animating and doing different things like that. And my youngest daughter loves like show tunes, theater, and all of that. So each of them have transitioned into a high school that has a creative track. Some kids are just wired that they do better if they have that thing also. So
for sure. Yeah.
And that's kind of what my husband and I have kind of recognized, is that we are the parents that see that in other kids and have been able to, like right now we do the college group for our church. And it's weird that a majority of those kids are creative kids who are growing up and now going, how do I live life without the excuse of high school theater and music, you know, choir and things like that? Like, they want to grow up and be big people, but they also have this pool of like, I want to have fun and I want this outlet. You know, how do I do both of those things? So it's been super cool to see the transition, and how my husband has always been a musician and has always had that outlet as his job, but to like him walking with me and seeing me really kind of like struggle with not having a creative outlet and finding those things, and it changing, because after we got married, like I went right back to Nashville Ballet and I was dancing, and you know, I used to tour with different groups. But once you become a mom, you know,
it's a lot harder.
Yeah, and you could hurt something and then you're in trouble, you know? I was like, I would be the person that breaks their leg and has 3 kids that have to, you know, carry their mom around on a pallet because she broke her leg in dance class. Like,
no.
I don't want to be that. So, yeah, like my creative journey is like, I'm still figuring it out. I'm still trying to write a book. You know, I got 40,000 words into a novel that fizzled out in my brain, like changed completely and got turned upside down. And I have my 19-year-old daughter telling me, Mom, it wouldn't be the book you want it to be today if you would have written it then. So let's just write it today, you know? So now I'm being taught by my children how to have patience and, you know, all of that stuff. But yeah,
wow.
I book trips to Disney World for people because it's been my family thing. Like, it's a weird thing to know that we get to do that together and they all love it as much as I do. It's the smells, it's the music, it's the treats and the songs and the rides that it now is reminiscent of them growing up, and they love it. So yeah, I get to do a podcast about, you know, how to get your family there and, you know, not have to sell the car to achieve it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's
Gaby
everything.
Robbins.
That sure is. So let's backtrack a little bit, if that's okay.
Sure.
First of all, that's so amazing that your mom did all of that for you to be able to instill those things in you. That's huge. And I know that was a huge part of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom's passed away. And I will say that, you know, the things she got pregnant with my older sister very young, and she traveled the world before she had her and danced and experienced things. And when she had my sister, she tried really hard to do that with my sister. And when my sister got older and kind of took off and started doing that on her own. And she ended up with my father. I feel like she kind of had a restart. You know what I mean? Like she got in her head, like, these kids I might not be around for, so let me give them as much as I can, kind of a thing. Because her and my dad didn't end up staying together. They were probably the best parents to have, just because my daddy put me to bed every night once they separated, and would go and, you know, go back to his own apartment. And I mean, talk about just loving and just amazing parents. But my mom just really felt like it was her job to show us that the world was bigger than what we were living in. Not only that, like, our culture was bigger than what we were seeing. Because being a Mexican American, it's one of those things where it's such a rich culture. And so she showed us all the art of Mexico, and she showed us how to create it ourselves. And it just was important to her that we didn't get pigeonholed. And I think because she worked in the housing authority, she saw how bad it could get if you let your surroundings dictate who you are. So, and two, she was just a lover of art. Like, she loved art and she loved books. I mean, I vividly remember seeing Tap Dance Kid, The King and I, Les Mis. Like, we were like center, second row at LA Pantages Theater watching Les Mis, and she's just bawling, you know, like, she loved art and creativity. She could only dance, like she could salsa, but she just knew that if she could give that to us, you know, we would just be more well-rounded kids. And both my sister and I have done that with our kids. Like, we both took our kids to see Hamilton, and her kids love theater, and so did my kids. And so she's definitely been a huge, huge influence on me and my sisters, all of us. So,
well, that's so cool just to have that legacy. And, you know, I think about my own daughters and what am I instilling in them, and how am I exposing them to creativity? And that's just a beautiful story of how it plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a way to honor her, you know, like my kids, my youngest daughter, who's a theater kid, when I sat down with her and we watched Newsies, because I watched that movie as a kid. Right. Her version is the theater, you know, the theatrical version. So she was like, Mom, too. Yeah. She's like, will you watch Newsies with me? And I was like, yeah. I was like, you know, me and Nana used to do this all the time. Like, we didn't get to watch it on YouTube, but it was like, I was like, Nana used to take, and she's like, I know, Mom, I know. And like, she sees my old playbills from when I was little, and her playbills are like gold to her, because she knows, like, I'm going to save my playbills the way that Mom saved her playbills, and what it means to me. You know, it's like a big deal. So I feel like it's really one of those legacies that continue, like, through the generations. And there'll be times where, like, what's really funny is that my mom was so excited when that community center by Edward James Olmos came to our neighborhood. Like, it was a big deal. It's still there. It's so cool. It's called Plaza de la Raza. And they have all kinds of art shows that go through there and dance classes. And I said to the kids, I was like, when we saw Coco, I was like, you know, the guy that started my art center? That's Chicharron and Coco. Like, oh. And so they were like, oh. And so now, like, they've got this huge connection of this man who is this voice actor, you know, on one of their Disney movies, who was an incredible inspiration to me growing up, and to so many kids, you know, that otherwise wouldn't have had an opportunity to have, because you paid based on your income. So you got to do all the dance classes, all of the theater classes, everything based on your income. So it was a great opportunity for people in my neighborhood that my mom was like, you're doing this. Like, there wasn't a real choice in the matter. But now I'm super grateful. You know what I mean? Some of my best memories.
That's really cool. So do you mind sharing some of the groups that you toured with, that you danced for?
Oh, yeah. I wish it was more. I actually was one of the original dancers for Out of Eden, which is a Christian R&B group. They're no longer touring or anything, but
I loved them.
I know. They were like, it was when Christian music, because for a really long time, it was just a lot of like white American people like Michael W. Smith and Amy Grant and, Stryper. It was them. That was a big, huge reason why I didn't want to be a Christian when my sister became a Christian, because I was like, dude, I don't know how this works with my life. Like, I don't get how, because music was such a big part of my life. And she was like, okay, come see this group. And she took me to see DC Talk, which her husband worked with. And they had dancers, and their backup dancers ended up being a hip hop group called Grits, who my husband was a DJ for. And Grits and Out of Eden were on the same label. And that's how I met my husband. So
fun.
Yeah, I toured with them. And then because I lived in Nashville and was a part of, like, this is back then especially, it was a very small community. You can catch me in some music videos because I was literally the only ethnic person in the area. So we would get called in to just do, different stuff. So I Can Only Imagine by Mercy Me, I'm in their music video. And
I didn't know that. I have to look that up now.
I had really short hair, so the funny thing is sometimes, how they'll do those Christian like compilation CDs at night, they'll sell them. Well, they have Mercy Me singing on stage with their huge screens behind them, and they played the video at one point. So we're watching this commercial, and my big freaking head, about 12 feet wide, pops up on the screen, and I was like, oh no, that's really bad. Like, people have been watching that, as they've toured. I'm sorry to everybody. I went through a short hair stage, and it was not a good stage for me, but
oh yeah, we gotta find that now.
Yeah,
that's great.
I know. I'm opening the door. And then, of course, Grits videos. I've been in some of their videos. So, yeah. But I really only toured with Out of Eden. And then I got married really young. So I kind of stopped doing all that and switched into mom mode for a good, I'm still there, but it was full-on mom mode for a good decade at least.
Wow. Yeah, that's fun. Just hearing those names, it's a part of my high school past.
Yeah.
So it's fun. And my husband loved all those as well. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun connection.
Yeah.
Okay, so you touched on the podcast and making the travel arrangements for other families going to Disney.
Yeah.
I know that that's not your main point of creativity, but share with us how doing those things, even if it is just a means for your family, it's a side job, but it does affect your daily creativity. Am I right?
Yeah, totally. So like day to day, I do social media, and like I work as a volunteer coordinator for an organization that kind of is wrapped up in this artist that I do social media for. And that you would think sounds creative, but it is very, very monotonous and very more marketing than you would imagine. I do a lot of the graphic design, but it's not creative. You know what I mean? It's not creative. It's a very specific, what am I trying to say? You're basically trying to target a specific audience. And so you do that for writing and you do that for books, but in a very creative way, where this is much more deliberate and calculated almost. So it is definitely not as creative as you might think. So my husband works from home and does music and is also finishing the last year of homeschool with our last little one. So he has limited time, and as in our marriage, our entire relationship has been tag team. So for many years, my husband toured, and his job is super creative, but is super hard when you're gone all the time. So when he stopped with the last tour, he kind of was like, I feel like it's time for me to be home and be a dad. And I was like, okay, cool. We just have to pay the bill. So I'll start, because and that was fine for me. Like, I wanted to do that. Like, I had been home, I'd been mom, and that never changes. But when you're full-time mom at home, that creative, and I also have a bit of OCD, that side of me was not being fed. And so I jumped right into it, and social media kind of landed in my lap. So whenever we could go to Disney World, it was like a huge treat, but it was a stretch. And it was right when the internet was really kicking off. And we took Maya one time when she was 3, and I was like, there has to be someone figuring out this madness. Like, which park do I need to go to, and how can I get the right fast passes, and how can I do this in a way that's getting us what we really want to see and in the most cost effective way. And so I just started researching, and funnily enough, it was years ago I started listening to a podcast about Disney World, and I was so intrigued by these people who went all the time, who had all these tips. And this was a good restaurant. And if you're going to pay a lot of money for a restaurant, you better know that that restaurant is good, or at least that's how I felt. So I started hearing all these people who knew all this stuff, and I didn't do it on purpose, but I heard about this travel agency, and I called because this girl was on this podcast, and she was like, hey, I don't really have time to book your trips, but I have a friend who could totally, do it. And I was like, awesome. And so, of course, because of my OCD, I was like, hey, can you book my trip? But I just want it to be da 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 da. Like, I already had it planned out. I just wanted her to give me any inside scoop she had. And if a deal came out, travel agents were really good about jumping on that and getting you the deal without even asking. Like, they would get it for you. So she and I became really good friends. And when I actually applied for a job at that travel agency to try to get a side hustle to do it, and I didn't have enough cruise experience, so I couldn't do it. So a few years later, I messaged my travel agent, and I was like, hey, do you know if they still require as much cruising experience? And she was like, I don't, but I just left the agency, and if you want to become a travel agent, you were the first person I was going to call to be my Disney rep. And I was like, yes, thank you. Sign me up now. I will do whatever it takes. So this was part of me being like, I am fully capable of booking other people's trips, only because I found so much joy in doing it myself for my family, and because I knew what it meant to my family. Now, our family is definitely very different than the average family. The average family doesn't go quite as often as we do, but the average family doesn't love it the way my kids do. I'm sure it would be different if my husband and my children didn't adore it all, but we also get to go, I get their viewpoints, and I get to see it so much more often that I'm helping other people, because I can be like, yeah, I heard everybody sees it on the commercials, go do Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique, but let's also be aware that your children will have shellacked hair for a whole day in 100-degree weather in a dress that's polyester. So bring some clothes and be ready to wet her hair in the bathroom. Like, you know what I'm saying? And let's get some Disney cards at Kroger so you can rack up the points. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I have that whole, like, if you're going to do it, here are all the things that make it truly magical, and not one of those things where you do it and then go, oh, we should have thought about this. Like, I'm a very practical person. So this part of me is, I love the magic of Disney, but my OCD part goes, I'm not going to waste this money. Like, it's going to be magical and it's going to feel worth it. So the travel planning has just become something that, I would hope could be my long-term job in the future, that once, we have all our kids in school and my husband goes a little more full-time and I can make enough money planning trips, that I can get to some of the other creative things I've put on the back burner for, providing for my family, which seasons, you know what I mean? There are seasons of that stuff. So yeah, for sure. The travel agency kind of checks all the boxes of creativity. I love to see families on vacation that I've helped book post their stuff and see just their photos of them doing the things my kids did and being so excited about it, and their parents going, I'm so glad we didn't do this, that, and the other thing, because Gabby told us not to. Like, it makes me happy. So yeah, I feel like it's a kind of a weird, a little bit of the creativity of sharing that joy with somebody else, like you do when you get to share a song or a book. You're sharing Disney, but it's also a part of like my giftings being a very organizational and helper. Like I'm a helper. And I know a lot of people talk about Enneagram and all that, which I do not fully understand. Don't ask me. But I know that whatever number I am is apparently like a helper person. And my spiritual gifts is the same way. It's servant, which I don't really like that word. But yeah,
I
that's
could see
kind of
that.
where my gifts line up. So it feeds a lot of different things in me that make me super happy. So yeah.
That's huge, though.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the whole point, right? Like,
Right.
we're all on a journey to find those things that scratch the itches that you have at that season. And right now, that's doing it for me. But yeah, I love it.
That's so great. So for anyone looking to go to Disney,
Yeah,
you're going to
hit
want
me up.
Gaby to hook you up. Where could they find you for that?
Well, my agency is called Pop Vacations or Pop Culture Vacations. But you can find me, Gaby Robbins, on Instagram, Facebook, and all of that, or Pop Vacations. Just ask for Gaby Robbins. So yeah, I love booking trips, and I feel like a lot of the booking a trip to Disney is super intimidating because you see like this huge price, right? But the best part of booking, even when you book directly through Disney, which don't get me wrong, if you're more comfortable doing that, do what makes you happy. But with an agent and with Disney, you put a small deposit down, and then you get to pay towards it, which is freaking amazing. It's not like a plane ticket, you know what I mean? Like you don't have to pay all of it up front. And then anytime a deal comes through, if I see that your hotel or your stay, you know, your dates of stay fit with that deal, I can just apply it. So that's the good part of a travel agent. We've got all the tips and tricks, but we also get the heads up on the deals right when they come out, and we can apply that to your reservation. So yeah, I mean,
really cool.
Trust me, as a Disney fan, I still used a travel agent because it was just, they knew when things were happening before I did. Or I just, I'm not waiting up for emails to come through, when I'm working a full-time job. But I do that now because I have problems, but whatever.
Well, and I love the idea of paying towards your trip. So then by the time your trip comes, you have already paid for most of it.
Exactly. And
that's huge.
I always like to give people an idea of what food's going to cost and what to expect for souvenirs so that you get there, you have it all ready to go. I think the biggest part is I think sticker shock is huge at Disney. Everything costs more than you think it's going to cost. And I'm really honest about that stuff because it does change the feel of your trip when you get there and it's not what you expected,
Oh, yeah,
and
sure.
I think it's kind of good, like, to be able to be like, hey, guess what? Start buying your kids Disney gift cards now because you're going to give them that gift card and be like, that's all you get. Spend it how you like, children, because everything's expensive. So pick one thing.
Right. One thing. This isn't an ad. Okay, well, it is an ad. Pop Culture Vacations. They are not a sponsor of this. I'm not getting anything out of this. But Gaby is a dear friend of mine, and I love what she's doing booking vacations with Disney. I think it's so fun, and if it's something you're interested in, then check it out.
Pop quiz. Wondering if you need a travel agent? What could an agent do for you that you couldn't figure out for yourself? With years of experience and real-time park updates, the agents at Pop Culture can take the hard work out of planning your next vacation. The agents at Pop have insight on park crowds, upcoming deals, and the experience to make your vacation as enjoyable as possible, all free of charge. For a free quote, email Gaby at popvacations.com. That's GABY at popvacations.com.
So, okay, you touched on writing, and
Yes.
I know that part of that may not be fully in this season you're in right now, but are you still writing? And how is that going?
Yeah. So when I met Morgan, I had an idea for a book, and that base idea, I tried with what I thought I had at that point. I will say, when Morgan and I met, Twilight was really popular, and so was like vampire books and it was a weird time, don't you think? Like the YA
it
genre was a weird time. But
and it was huge. It had blown up.
It was ginormous. And it's a different monster than it is now. Like the YA genre can be a blockbuster movie, which could not have happened in the past.
Right.
But I will say that it was very kitschy at that point. And I was reading a lot of self-published books, and I was reading a lot of like really gritty, like it was some intense stuff, you know? And so I feel like the stuff that I was into at that point when I was writing the first draft of that book, which I've always called Enigma, which has always just been in my brain that way, was a little bit on the kitschy side. And it had a little bit of these tropes that I was loving. Like I was loving at that point.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand world building. I didn't understand, like I could tell you exactly what I wanted the stories to be about, but I didn't understand how to do that. And I feel like I let that bog me down to the point of I got stuck. And what was weird was that I got stuck, and then I started watching movies and reading books that had those tropes and had a lot of the same things in my book. And I realized that it wasn't what I wanted it to be. I started thinking to myself, was I just doing this to get it out to be like, I wrote a book? You know what I mean? Like I did this thing. And I realized that there hasn't really been much in my life that I haven't put 1,000% in, and like my house and my children, and maybe not my body because I'm not good at putting 1,000% at working out or anything like that. But like there isn't much in my life that I don't freaking OCD 1,000%. And I feel like there was a little bit about this plot that I wasn't 1,000%ing. I just wanted it to sound like a book that I had read. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I wanted it to sound like a book. And so there was a little part of me that died when I realized that, ooh, like that would have been bad. Like that would not have been good. I went and saw Wonder Woman, and I felt like such an idiot because so much of the world that I built was just like the world of the Amazons in Wonder Woman. I didn't realize that though, because I had never read Wonder Woman's backstory, and I was sucker punched, and I wanted to vomit, and I was so sad, and I was just like, oh, this is awful. And so what I did was I kind of just put it away, and then I grabbed a new notebook, and I started writing down all the things that I knew that I wanted in my book,
that's good.
and what I wanted in my story. And so I have that notebook, and I come back to it. It sits right beside my bed, and I come back to it, and it literally is an everyday thing. It has never stopped from the moment that I put that first draft away, of me saying, so if she grew up in this town and did this thing, how would this play out? I've literally gone over and over and over her story and how she should become who she is, probably millions of times at this point. And I want to say that just this month, I've landed on something that I feel rings true.
Yay.
But that's just where she is today. Do you know what I mean? Like the very beginning of that, and how that all plays out from that point is still, I'm going to start plotting and doing. But I want to say that it's not a dead thing in my world. I feel like it's something that I want to give time to. But like I said, I work a full-time job. We homeschool one of our kids. I do a side hustle with this, travel agency, which I do all their social media for. I really am pooped at the end of the day. And so there's also something about creativity being squashed by just life, there is only so many hours in the day. And I also realize that. So it's a season, and I think it's a good season. I'm marinating on it. I'm doing it when it comes to me. And it's still a goal in my life to write Enigma. It's still a goal in my life. And what's funny is that Hayley Williams from Paramore has always been somebody who has triggered Enigma in my brain to come out. Like every time. And it's when I worked in Franklin, she lives in Franklin, and I would see her, and it would be like, she is her, the girl, my main character. Like she's her. And so she just put out a new album or a new EP, and I'm like, which of course music, let's not talk about how music just absolutely breaks me every time I hear a song I want to write a new story about. But her new album is like, it's killing me because it's literally the mature version of my character. Like she's been divorced. She's not with Paramore. She's not doing music with Paramore right now. Like it's this weird. So I feel like it's a season, right? And let's just pray that I I complete this and get this done at some point, because I have no aspirations to be, J.K. Rowling, but I would like to look at my kids and be like, I wrote a book. Here it is, and it's done. And that would be good enough for me.
But it's still there. It's still there simmering under the surface, every time you question it and write it down and see her. And I mean, it's still there. It's alive. Yeah. It's just growing.
And what's really funny is that there are times where I'll think of scenes and I'll be like, is this good enough as the first scene I read in your books when they were I'm not going to give anything away, but like they were in a circle. And I was like, holy crap, Morgan wrote a real book. Like she's for real. And I was like reading it. And every time I think about it, I was like, is my intro as good as that intro? Oh, I always think about it that way. So yeah, I'm not trying to, puff you up or anything, but that does go through my mind every single time.
Wow. Well, I'm flattered. Thank you.
Yeah. Well,
but I think it's an important point to mention, with any creative endeavor, that sometimes there are times, and it's good to question it. Yeah. And because you don't want to rush through it. You don't want to just throw something out there, because then it's out there and you can't really take that back very well. So, you want it to be what it's meant to be. And if it needs more time to grow and to change and to become the creation that it's supposed to be. And honestly, maybe even you as the writer becoming more of the person that you need to be when that time comes, then it's all going to come together in this perfect storm of, hey, here I am. Yeah. Let's do this.
I feel like tonight I was a little late for recording because we were watching The Last Jedi again. My family watched it again. I watched it for the first time. But I remember vividly sitting in the theater, and there's a scene where all of these ships come out. And I won't, if anybody hasn't seen it, I won't give it out. But there's all these ships there, and it's a very triumphant, hugely meaningful thing. Mm-hmm. And I sat there, and I was just shaking my head, and Rick was like, what? And I'm bawling. And I'm just bawling, and he's like, babe. And I'm like, it's so good. And it wasn't any kind of amazing, obviously it's all make-believe because it's flying ships in space. But I was so moved by the moment. And my first thought was, I want to make these moments. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't come by just sitting down and writing it one time. You know what I mean? And I get that. But I also feel like the culmination of how many movies and books and stories have led to that moment, because it means so much. You know what I mean? You have to write a layered thing. You have to write a thing that matters. You have to write something that has skin and pain and love and tears for it to matter that much. Right. And I just feel like after all these years and all these characters kind of growing up in my head, and honestly, me growing up, who would have thought? I was my 30s back then, and now I'm in my 40s. But I feel like I am a different person than I was when I was in my 30s. Mm-hmm. And I see things differently. And I think our world has changed so much. It's I feel like now I have a story to tell that is even more entertaining than the tropes that I was digging back then. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm saying? That means something. Huge. Yeah, it does. And I feel like there's nothing bad about those, because heck, I am down for a werewolf book. Give it to me, man. And I am still down to write one that's about Pride and Prejudice with werewolves. I'm all about that. But there's a part of you that also wants to watch those Star Wars movies or Harry Potter movies that just feel... And I have no intention of saying I'm going to do something like that. But that reading a book that just means something to you, because you care about the characters and you care why they're sad and you care why this is happening, I feel like sometimes that takes time to grow and, and I feel like I'm okay with that. Now, if we're doing this again in 10 years and I haven't written the book yet, you're welcome to just be like, Gaby, don't come out of your house till you finish, because it's unacceptable.
Oh, I will.
But at the same time, I'm willing to admit that this might have been a good thing. The other thing, which I think you'll find completely hysterical, is we went to BEA, me and Kelly, which is a friend of ours, and I had all these books that I haven't read yet. And I'm like, I used to go through like a book a week. Do you remember this? Like I would read through books. Well, my brain I'm blind, by the way, after all of screen time. I have so many layers of glasses now, progressive, the whole bit. But I have not picked up a book and sat down and just read it for years. And so I was like, I had this book and it was so interesting. And I sat down, I opened it. The first scene, not joking, almost verbatim what my first draft of that Enigma book would have been. That first scene. I was like, oh my gosh, who's in my room right now? Like, I was so blown away.
Oh, wow.
I got up and I went to my husband, who's one of the very few people who's actually read that. And I was like, what does this sound like? And he was like, whoa. And I was like, yep. Now that book came out, 4 or 5 years ago.
That's wild.
But it was wild, right? So I was like, yeah, I think I need to rethink the whole, like, I just need to get down and get dirty and write my own thing. You know what I mean? And it wasn't my time. Like, it wasn't time to do that. So I will say writing is still a big deal. Now my daughter's doing it, and it's super exciting to be able to look at her and be like, don't be like me. Sit down and get your book done, and buying her notebooks she's reading the Stephen King book on writing right now. And, and she's doing it complete. She is getting an art degree, but she is an affinity for Stephen King, which I'm a brave girl. I'm all about it. You do that. Yeah. But it's great, because I can give her as much insight as I might have. And then I'm like, you're going to have to talk to Kelly and Morgan about the rest of the stuff, because I really don't know. But yes, it's really nice to be able to share that with her.
No, that's super cool. And actually that is a great segue into what I was going to ask you next, which involves the kids. And my question is, how do you help assist or guide them in their creativity? Because you have 3 kids and they're into all different things. I guess, how does that happen? How do you guide them?
Yeah. Well, what's really funny is that when Rick and I got married, and before that, we did, I don't know if you did this, but like our marriage counselors were like, you need to sit down and write a vision for your family. And we were like, okay, what does that mean? And I think we realized, like, we wanted to do all the things that we felt like were great about when we were growing up, and the things that maybe were missing. We wanted to try to put those things into the focus of our family. And a big part of that was purpose. What's purpose? Like, why are we here? Big picture, if you believe in God, what has God created you to do? And 2, like, if you're here and your job is to be a musician, what does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, what does that mean for the world? And so there was a huge part of us that knew that our creativity were the things that kept us from the really bad stuff that could have happened in our lives, that could have taken us down really bad paths. And so when we were raising the kids, we'd be like, what do you like? Like, what do you want to do? And homeschool was such a big part of that. Like, a huge part of that was, what do you want to do? You want to try this? Like, yeah, let's do dance class. Like, yeah, let's do soccer. Let's do all the things. The only prerequisite to the things that we let our kids try was they had to finish. If they signed up for a semester or they signed up for 4 months, they had to do the whole thing. And so my kids did a lot of different things, but we just would also be like, you're really good at XYZ. Let's try more of that. Like, really trying to, number 1, seeing their learning style, which is a homeschool thing, but 2, letting them explore all the things that they even had the smallest bit of interest in. My son Quinn, from the moment he could talk, all he wanted to do was play video games. Literally, that's all he wanted to do. And so there's a part of me that was like, oh my gosh, he's going to live in my basement and do nothing but video games. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, we're going to teach you how to make video games. How about that? So we put him straight into coding because he was a whiz on the computer. But while he was coding, they gave him an assignment to do like an app, and he hated all of the illustrations. And so he said, Mommy, these just don't look good. And I was like, you know how to make those. Go in and make something that you like. And so, being the OCD parent, I was like, here's a program, like, here, open this up, do this thing, and taught him how to do it. And he started creating his own animations and his own illustrations and stuff. And he came to us because this is a conversation in our household. You're homeschooling to have time to find out what you really want to do, because school is just the building blocks of your future. Now, it could change. We're not saying you're locked into this thing, but what are you supposed to be doing right now? School is your job. And then in the future, what do you want to do? Because Daddy toured, music was huge in our house. We listened to every kind of music in our household. My husband is a DJ, so we could, scratch out the cuss words, but we listen to every kind of music in our household. My kids listen to everything from Ariana Grande to Michael Bublé to Japanese music to my son listens to Claire de Lune to go to sleep every night, and it has nothing to do with Twilight. Thank the Lord. He likes that song. But our kids listen to everything. And it was important to us because music is such an inspiration to us. My husband, obviously, for his job, but for me, for books and ideas and, inspiration for getting up in the morning and working out and all of that stuff. But we would say, what do you like? What you want to do? And he was like, Mommy, I don't mind coding. I can do coding, but I love making pictures. I love doing that thing. And I was like, cool. We're canceling the coding school. We're doing the illustration. And we got him a tablet, and he now is he'll be a senior next year. And he did an art track, which he could have done the coding track, but he knew he wanted to do art. And he's an amazing little illustrator, and the poor kid can't focus. Like, we go to church every Sunday, and he takes his pad and he sits and he draws while he's listening. And I've said to him, well, so what do you think was the most important thing? And he was like, oh, I loved it when the pastor said da 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 da. And his brain works so good if he sits and draws while the pastor's talking. And you just got to figure out those things and ask those questions, what is it? Like, Shane loves theater and loves music, and she was listening to the Hamilton soundtrack before people even knew Hamilton was a thing, because she'd be like, Mommy, can I hear, we had a YouTube rule. I had to listen to everything they listened to. I liked Lin-Manuel Miranda. I knew him from when he was on PBS and stuff. And I was like, yeah, and I was like, Hamilton, it's history, and obviously hip hop isn't a big deal for us. And she just started really exploring the world of musical theater, and every person in my household is in love with that show because she played that music all the time when she would do the dishes, when she would be cleaning her room. And it's one of those things where we all truly influence each other. In
I was
whatever
there once
is the
when
thing.
she was playing it.
Yeah, it's her thing, and we do our best to be a part of that with them. Or Shane wanted to enter a contest to see Hamilton. And so I did a rap with her, you know what I mean? On Instagram, and posted it. I mean, I've done things with Maya that way. Maya loves to cook. She thought she would do that. And it was a skill that all of my kids got to do because they were homeschooled, but she can literally bake or cook anything with a recipe. But then once she's learned it, she can do any kind of, riff on stuff.
Oh,
but
that's
that wasn't her thing. You know what I mean? She loves fashion. She only buys stuff from thrift stores, which boggles my mind. But she thought she might want to go to SCAD, and we went and saw it, and talk about a den of creativity. The Savannah College of Art and Design for fashion in Atlanta I would live there if I could. It's beautiful and perfectly designed, and there's all these creative people. But she got accepted, and it was $36,000 a year on top of all of her scholarships. And she just said, Mama, I don't know that that's what I want to do. And I was like, cool. So here in Tennessee, we have a 2-year free community college, and she's going to finish her art degree. And now when she thinks about it, she's like, I'm not sure that's what I want to do. So she's going to do the college program, the Disney college program. If she gets accepted, she's been applied to it, and see, because she loves that so much, see if maybe that's the route she wants to go to. But I just feel like for our family, our goal is to enable our kids to explore and to figure out, number one, who they are in Christ, and then who he's made them to be. And that doesn't mean they're going to be rich, and that doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it does mean they're going to be satisfied knowing they've followed the path they were supposed to take. And that could be anything. They're definitely all creative beings, you know? It kind of feeds their soul. So, yeah.
Yeah.
We definitely we've been blessed. We have 3 really great kids.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So speaking of what feeds your soul, what is it that drives you to find creative outlets? What is that thing in you that just has to create?
There's a part of me that knows what it feels like to be in that zone. And I also want to like recognize there's something about being creative, whether you're making music, singing music, dancing, or performing, that high is something that I see why people go broke trying to do it. Do you know what I mean? Like, because there's nothing like, number one, entertaining other people, but how it makes you feel. You feel very complete when you're performing and when you're doing stuff. And when I see other people doing that, there's a hunger in me to find that. And I can find that reading a book by being triumphant with a character, or by seeing how an author got something done, like got something accomplished in the plot. I can feel that. So there's there's ways for me to feel that feeling where I'm in the pocket of what God's created me to do, and the satisfaction I get from doing it. So I feel like because it's something that I've felt before, that if I haven't had that for a little while, like because the monotony of every day has kind of gotten in the way, I seek it out. So I can get that satisfaction from a really good British crime drama on Amazon. You know what I mean? I can get that satisfaction from watching an amazing, interpretation of Jane Austen. But there are times where it takes a little more, and I want to do it myself. And so I'll sit and I'll write, and I'll sit and, do things with my kids to help them. That does give me that satisfaction too. But there's just a part of me that knows that it's not an everyday thing for me. I'm not a performer. I know that's not what I'm called to anymore. That was a hard pill to swallow for a really long time. But I know that where I'm at is where I'm supposed to be at. Like being a mom is super satisfying, and knowing that my kids are going to be able to have that balance. Like I didn't know what that was. You know what I mean? And like, oh, my poor mother, she didn't know what that was. Like she could have probably wrote an amazing freaking Danielle Steele novel. She had read every book ever written, and probably had it in her to do that. You know what I mean? But she didn't know that was in her grasp or capability. And it's a fine balance of recognizing it's not my time. You know what I'm saying? And when I need it, finding it. It's a part of me. You know what I mean? It's a part of me. And to like going to places like Disney, or knowing that I'm helping other people do that, like it's a happy place. You know what I mean? It's got all of those things.
That's really cool. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to add or cover that maybe we didn't get to touch on?
When you hear other people's stories, it's just super helpful to know that, number one, you're not alone, and the voices in your head could be a book, and that's totally fine. And, seeing your kids and hearing a song that just makes you go to another place is a totally natural thing and super important. I feel like life makes you think, oh, whatever, I'm losing my mind a little bit, but it makes you have a more well-rounded life. You know what I mean? Like I got to get up this morning, go to church with my family, and then go see Star Wars and talk about creativity, like well-rounded day. Like this is awesome. Like
Love it.
I love it. Like I feel like it's a huge part of who people are. And sometimes that's the thing that gets you down when you don't feed that in yourself.
Right.
It makes you feel a little hopeless. And I felt that, but thank God that I have people like my husband and my friends to be able to be like, okay, let's figure it out. What are you missing in your life right now? So it's important to know that it's important.
Yeah.
And number 2, to surround yourself with people that can help you find that thing. Because it might not be what you think,
Yeah, for sure. Really good. If they want to hear about your Disney adventures, the podcast is Off the Cuff, correct?
It's called Form Family Off the Cuff. So my family is Form Family Universe. So that's our little Instagram when we go to Disney. And then Off the Cuff is my best friend's ministry. Her husband is a Disney cast member. And so we did a podcast called Form Family Off the Cuff.
Oh, gotcha.
And so what it is her family, they live and work and like are at Disney. And their whole goal is there's so many Disney cast members that come from other countries that have never been in the United States and don't know anybody. And so they invite them over and they have game nights, and they don't celebrate Christmas like we do. And so they have a Christmas meal with them or a Thanksgiving meal with them. And so we go down there and help with that stuff. And it's just awesome because we love Disney so much. We appreciate the people who make it magical for us. So
that's really cool.
Yeah, it is cool. And we're planning on getting that podcast up and running soon. My best friend's dad's a little bit ill, and so things have been on hold, but we will get back up and running very soon. So, yeah.
Okay, and so they can find you on Instagram.
Yeah, Gaby Robbins. Yeah.
Okay.
Gaby Robbins, find us there, and then all my other stuff is all connected to that.
I'll link you in the show notes, so make it easy for everybody to find you.
That's
because
great.
You guys, her Disney pictures are so fun and inspiring, and it will make you want to be there and call her for travel agent help.
Yeah, absolutely. Or just call me if you need tips and tricks, because I know, dude, it's rough. There's a lot to know. I think that's the big thing. Like, you go to Disneyland a lot. I used to do that, and it was like, oh, we're going to Disneyland today. You cannot do that with Disney World. Like,
no.
Yeah, people are booking those trips a year out. So it's one of those things where you don't know until you know, and it's like a lot more than you expect. So even if you just need help, travel agents don't get paid by their clients. They get paid by Disney. So call me because I'm here for you. And I love doing it. That's the best part.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Gaby, thank you so much for spending time with us.